So in my last video I talked about basic segmenting techniques and I clearly mentioned the name Mark James. I think Mark James is one of the best pen segmenters out there. And I contacted him and I asked him if he wouldn't mind helping contribute to this channel. And he clearly said yes. So this next video I'm going to show you, it's some advanced techniques that Mark uses. And you know what? I'm happy that we have him on this channel. And I'm happy that he said that he would donate his video to this one so that you can see what we can do with segmenting techniques and how we can advance them. So with that, let's get right into the video.
Hello everybody, my name is Mark James. I'd like to welcome you into my shop today. I'll show you a few things that I've been doing with some simple segmenting to build on a foundation for skills for some more advanced designs. So come on in and let's get started. Okay, so here is a Royal Poinciana blank. Very nice blank. I really like working with the wood and use it quite frequently, but it's a fairly plain looking pen. Nothing wrong with it, perfectly fine, but just nothing special that will jump out at you. So I'm going to use this wood and two more different varieties to show you with some very simple techniques how you can jazz up your pens, make them look just a little bit more visually stunning. Okay, so here we have another segment of Royal Poinciana. This one is spalted, so it's quite a bit more vibrant than the previous one. And I've added black palm end caps, that's the dark ones, and two credit card veneers. And adding these four segments adds a lot to the visual appeal of the final pen. So that is, again, something that should be taken into consideration for if you want to jazz up your pens. Okay, so here's the third version where I've added two black palm trim rings, four credit card veneers, and two Royal Poinciana end caps, which came from the same blank. The visual appearance, I think, is quite a bit more attractive. If you sell pens, obviously there will be a difference in what you could command for that. And just to clarify, trim rings are, to me, an element within the middle, end caps are on the ends. Whether that's correct or not, I'm not sure, but that's at least what I use. I'll show the same design elements with two section pens. So here I'm not sure, I think it may be a Koa blank. Very pretty, very nice, but again, nothing incredibly stunning other than the plain wood, which is perfectly fine. Another two-section pen where I've added the credit card veneers and end caps. Again, I believe the visual appearance makes quite a nice impression. Here I have some, I guess it's a little bit of a teaser, some real fancy trim rings, but again, the main idea here is that by adding the trim rings as well as the end caps, it really makes a nice appearance. Okay, so now the question is, or what we need to look at, is how we can go from a fairly basic plain wood pen into something a little bit more visually appealing without needing a real lot of more equipment or really special techniques. So what I'm going to show now are the basic steps, and they're actually fairly simple. So for adding the veneers and the trim rings to a basic blank in the middle, this is the composition that you need to come up with. Okay, let's see, I got the blank on the mandrel, And I'm just going to mark off the areas that I'm going to part all the way down to the brass tube. The actual dimension isn't important as long as each side is the same. Now, I've tried using calipers and they just seem a little bit more cumbersome, so just a plain old stick or whatever you want to use to mark it the way I did seems to work best for me. So we'll see how this video recording goes. Okay, so I'm parting it down, and as you can tell, when I get to the brass, it's going to shift a little bit, so I have to move the tailstock over again because the brass tube was a little bit recessed inside the blank. So readjust the tailstock, tighten it up, used a different parting tool to get it a little bit closer, and I intentionally didn't mark the blanks quite as accurately as I could, so you can see the trial and error that does happen until you get a little bit more experience. After you've done 2 or 3 pens like this, it becomes a very quick job. So I'm basically just parting it down to the brass tube for a very exact size on both sides, that they're equal, so that when I put the veneers in and the end caps, it'll be of the same dimension. Now, I personally don't like constructing the blank all assembled before I put it on the mandrel. I like to turn it down because that will ensure that there's no wobble in your segments. It's very, very precise doing it this way. Second side went much quicker. And you can see how I move the parting tool back and forth. That just gets any of the glue off. So both sides are equal. Okay, so back, just as a reminder, this is what you're looking for. I drilled the veneers separate as well as the end caps. Okay, so we got a card on the bottom. I'll just do a test run for this. Very nice and clean. So that'll fit in there like that. So let's do a couple more off of this. Keep it centered there, and I can just move up a little bit. If you want to get precise, you can make marks on the side to center it. I'll just kind of eyeball this. Pushing down pretty hard to keep the 2 boards there. Got 4 of them. Okay, so we're back. We're back here. We got our middle section with the main blank parted down to the brass tubes. We've got our 2 credit card veneers drilled and cleaned up. I used some acetone to get some of the ink off, and the rest I just used some sandpaper with. Now we need to get the 2 end caps, and there are some considerations on this. You want to be drilling through the end grain so that the side drain is all the way around so that you're not having side drain, end drain mismatch. So I'll show you how I do that. So probably the easiest way to have side drain all the way around your end cap or trim ring when we get to that is to use a pen blank. Then you just drill your hole in the middle, cut off a couple slices for whatever dimension you want, and then you're done. If you're using a board, that's a little different because then you have to cut the board in a certain manner which will allow you to have a piece large enough to be drilling through the end grain. So I'll show you that. So here I have a small section of a board left over from another project. So I want to cut it so that the end grain will be where I can drill through so that the side grain will be all the way around the four sides. That then prevents you having a mismatch between side grain and end grain. So here you can see I have a box of end caps and trim rings that I've cut when I have certain pens I'm doing in sequence. And I also, as you can see here, I've got some Corian. So if you get those little sample discs that are about 2 inch by 2 inch, I just cut 4 holes in each, and that's a pretty nice 1/4 inch thick trim ring. So those are pretty nice too. Okay, I've cut up a 10-inch long random brass tube, and I'm going to just make up a couple sample sections to show you how I piece these together. So these are going to be nothing that I'll use for a pen, but it'll show you kind of nicely. So here I think I have a 2.5, 3-inch section. I'm just cutting it on the drilling it on the drill press. Okay, so after drilling the proper hole, I'm using a small Model Maker's Burns table saw. You could cut your segments on a bandsaw, a table saw, whatever method you want. My bandsaw's out in my garage, so I have this downstairs in my workshop, so this is what I use. I'm fairly happy with it, but again, you can cut your slices however you wish. Before I would actually glue these on with the veneers in the middle section onto the tube, I would clean it up so that I get a nice clean fit. Okay, going back to the middle section where we parted it down to the brass tube, you can tell that there is a little bit of excess material right at the inside portion. So we need to clean that up so we get a nice fit. And I'll show you next a picture of what the problem looks like closer. Here you can see when I put the veneer in and the end cap without tightening it up a little bit, it's a pretty noticeable mismatch. So we have to go back and clean that section out so that we get a better fit. And I use a combination of just a sharp razor blade and a triangle file to get the very inside edges clean. So this looks much better, and now I'll show you the fit. Here you can see after I cleaned up the inside edges, I got a much cleaner fit. And it doesn't matter that the walnut end cap is a little bit miscentered with the hole. You're just going to turn it around anyway, so that is no issue. Okay, so here we have all of the elements. Let's put it together. Okay, in most cases I prefer to use a two-part epoxy. let it sit overnight. I'm not in that big of a hurry. And I want to make sure that my clamps are even so that there's no unevenness in the pressure points, leaving any gaps. And then I take my time, let it set, come back tomorrow. Okay, now you get to see the real exciting part, which is why I don't show too much turning. It's just pretty boring. We all know how to do this. So I could have taken the extra dimensions of the veneers off with a bandsaw or a disc sander. I find it's just as easy to throw it on the lathe and take it down. Now, when you start to do the turning, if you haven't done this kind of segmenting before, even though it's fairly basic segmenting, be aware that you're going to have to get used to having the different densities between the middle section of the veneers and the end caps to not dig in too deep for the softer wood and have little bumps and ridges. And that's just practice. So just work this down, get it even. Typically, work from the outside in. Don't always do that, but I try to be mindful of it. Now keep in mind, and you'll see this later, those two end caps are oversized, meaning they are proud of the tube, so we're going to have to deal with that. Yeah, you see, I do know how to ride the bevel. Now, if you, at this point, see any wobble in your veneers, that means that your segmenting wasn't done properly and it's not centered. These look pretty good. They look like it's a pretty tight ring. Clean it up a little bit, take it off the lathe, and now you're going to see where I need to go over to my table saw and knock the ends off a little bit, get it a little closer, and then maybe even take it to my sanding jig on my smaller lathe and sand it down to the brass tubes. Okay, so that blank, I'm not going to finish that up, but here's a finished pen with the two end caps. So this is the design that I just went through, and this is how it would come out. So let's move on to the next. Okay, so we're back to the middle section, adding 4 veneers, 2 trim rings, and 2 end caps. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all the steps again because they're essentially the same. The only consideration here is that the 2 middle trim rings, the darker of the sections, they need to be very, very precisely the same dimensions. The end caps can be longer, shorter, it doesn't matter since they'll be trimmed, but you want the 2 middle trim rings to be the same dimension. Okay, so here's the final blank with the end caps, veneers, and trim rings. It has not been glued up, but after that's done, let's go to the lathe. Okay, so last step, putting the blank on the mandrel, as typical. Let's see, what can I say about this? I'll go a little bit slower on these types of blanks because those end caps are a little bit thin and I don't want to shatter them. I could have stabilized them a little bit more with CA, but I didn't. Sometimes I might do that. I haven't been too bad, but it's also been commented that I'm about the slowest turner some other people have ever seen, but that's okay. Guilty as charged. So I'm going to just turn it down a little bit. I'll work the end caps from the outside in to use the support that I have. And just take my time and go slowly. At this point in time, you've got a little bit of time involved in constructing this, so you don't want to shatter it at this point. Just kind of nibble away. I will at times go back and hone my gouges. Depending on the wood, I change the tools. Sometimes the tool just doesn't feel right, so I change it. I've used these small red Sorby tools for a long time and I really like them. I've been using the Magic Skew, all different radiuses, quite frequently when I use some mixed medias. And this blank I will not be taking down to final size. It's just a demo blank. I'm not going to turn it into a pen. This was just being used to show you how I construct this type of a design. Again, if you pay attention to the clean lines on the white veneers, if you have a wobble, when I get a wobble, that means I did it wrong. When I clamped it up, it may have had a pressure point which wasn't even, or maybe I didn't clean up close by the brass tube enough. These look pretty clean. I'm happy with it. It would have made a nice pen, but I was just using some scrap for this demo. As with the last blank, the first one, these end caps are oversized. So when this is done, I'm not going to bother to do it, but when this was done, I would either take it to a sanding jig to sand it down to the brass tubes, or use my table saw. Not too bad. I do many complicated, excuse me, complicated segmenting, but these two I do come back to frequently when somebody asks for 4, 5, 6 pens, because it's a very clean design, it's easy to do.
Thank you, Mark, and I hope that that one doesn't disappoint anybody. I don't see how it could. Mark, I think, is one of the best segmenters around. And as I always say, thank you for watching. If you have a minute and you like the video, please give me a like. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel and hit that subscribe button. As always, I'm looking for comments in the comment section, and if you have any questions, I can also shoot them to Mark and see where they go. So please use that comment section for any comments that you have on this video. Also, consider in the comments putting any kind of information you want on any other topics. As you can see, I don't mind asking my friends to help me out on this channel, and I think that's really what I want to do and where we're going to take this channel for the community. So with that, I thank you. If you haven't had a chance also, there's a Facebook group called 10 Minutes to Better Pen Making. Please consider joining that Facebook group page. It's going to be the easiest way to contact me or ask me other questions a little bit more in real time. Thank you. This video made possible by the fine folks at Exotic Blanks. For all your pen making needs, Exotic Blanks has you covered. Find them at www.exoticblanks.com. And also by Pen Makers International, the educational source for pen making.